name is Andrea Leap,
And I'm Joey Clark.
and we are your instructors for the Cabaret class that will be held through Ling Blomsten this spring of 2020, the coronavirus special edition Cabaret class that we will be teaching.
Part of the goals of this class are for us to share with you some of the background of cabaret and for then you to be able to create your own little cabaret performance. And we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet. We'll see what the universe allows us to do. But we are imagining some type of virtual performance that is either audio recorded or video recorded with you sharing your story.
So the way the class is structured is there'll be a series of three videos, and this is the first one of those videos, where we give you some background on cabaret and some understanding of how cabarets are created and cabaret material is put together so that it hangs together in a way that is engaging and exciting for the audiences to really listen to. And after those three videos, then those of you who will be signing up for the class will have some one-on-one sessions with Joey and I, and we will help you craft a story that you are going to tell partly through song and partly through words. And we, again, never know exactly how that's going to look, even in a regular type of cabaret class. But in this one, once you just figure out what kind of story it is that you want to tell and we put that together, then we'll figure out the best platform for us to be able to perform that so that you can share that with other people.
So Andrea and I are both cabaret performers, and we have taught this class many times, person to person. This is our first time teaching it this way. And our role here is really to help you craft your story and support you in telling it in the best way possible, and kind of pinpointing an audience who you want to tell your story to as well. So we might be giving you lessons over the phone. We might be listening to you and helping you edit over the phone, or maybe in a video platform like Zoom or FaceTime, or maybe just over emails where we exchange emails with things that you have written and give you feedback that way.
So who are the best students for this class? And really, the people that should take this class are anybody who has a story that they would like to tell. And that can be a story that you would want your friends and neighbors to hear, something about a time in your life that they might not know about, something for your grandchildren, for your children, for younger relatives, so that they can understand a period of time that they didn't get to experience. But anything like that, where you feel like, I have something that I would like to express. This is a class that gives you an opportunity to express that story in a creative way, in a performance way, in a really storytelling, direct, one-on-one, personable, comfortable, engaging way. So if you have an idea of something that you would like to share, that's a great place to start. But even if you don't have an idea of what you'd like to share, if you know that you're interested in doing the sharing, this is a great class for you.
So let's go back to basics. What is cabaret? When that word comes into your mind, what are all the things you think of? A lot of people think of that Liza Minnelli movie back in the 70s, I believe it was, right? And the show Cabaret. Well, that movie is based on actually what cabaret was, but that is not the limits to cabaret. In a very simple way, cabaret is personal storytelling that involves spoken word and song. But it can be much more than that as well. For me, cabaret is an opportunity to have a really intimate sharing with an audience of people. Usually cabarets are in small venues, like the back of a bar or something. So you're able to have kind of a relaxed and intimate conversation almost with your audience as a performer. Andrea is going to give us a little bit about the history of cabaret.
So cabaret really began as an art form between World War I and World War II, and it started primarily in Germany, but it quickly spread to the rest of Europe. and it started in Berlin specifically. And Germany, after World War One, had severe economic depression. The majority of the population was hungry and unemployed, and there was not a lot of extra going on at that time. And this was sort of the prime way for cabaret to get going because it's a very low budget art form. You don't need anything. You just need a room with one person willing to deliver the performance and other people willing to listen to the performance. That's really all that's required. And so this was a way for people to come together, and cabaret began as this very intimate, small, low budget performance, which was created pretty much by one or two people putting something together to present for other people. And again, that kept the economics of it very, very manageable at the time. But because there was such a level of despair and just overwhelming anxiety, both economically and politically, all the things that were going on at that time, it started to really develop a particular trend, which was that the performer who was performing was in some ways always expressing their sense of feeling like an outsider. They were always expressing their sense of being disenfranchised from the larger society, either because they didn't have money or because they weren't the right religion or didn't have the right sexual orientation or whatever. That they felt like an outsider, and they were expressing that sense of feeling outside of the mainstream to this audience. But here's the key: that expression of feeling like an outsider was a way of including the people who were listening, as saying, oh, but don't you have the same experience of feeling a little bit outside of the normal? Don't you have the same feeling of feeling a little bit set apart or ignored, or not celebrated for who you are? So it was this way of saying, look, I'm on the outside, but you're on the outside with me, in this very intimate, inclusive way of finding a little bit of togetherness and community in that sense of feeling apart, if that makes sense, from the larger whole. So it originally had this real sensibility of a lot of ironic style of comedy, a lot of wry humor, some black humor as well, very much a dark sort of over sensibility to it. But it quickly morphed out of that into a much more direct, one-on-one personal storytelling experience. And we still see some of that heritage today. So cabaret is primarily told in the first person. If I'm getting up and doing a cabaret set, I am telling you this information from my point of view. It's not a third person narrative, it's a first person narrative. And that is a direct legacy from the origins of cabaret. Also, the size and the scope and the intimacy, that also comes from that original cabaret venue. But of course, the musical language is completely different now that we're 100 years after the fact. The topics that are brought into this also completely different at this point. And how it's approached, now we have a little bit more of a sense of sophistication around cabaret, a little bit more of an elegant nightclub feel, which of course was never the original incarnation of cabaret at all. But we do still have that one-on-one, intimate, personal storytelling as the core of the art form.
That's so interesting to hear you talk about, Andrea, how it started off as kind of like minorities in a way, getting together and finding some commonality in a time where they felt secluded or isolated, right? And how right now, during the quarantine, we have that similar feeling of being isolated. It'd be interesting to see how that translates into cabaret that's done now in this era.
I agree, because while we'll be missing that immediate audience response and that very personal conversation, in terms of feeling apart, we're there's nobody who doesn't understand that feeling right now. So there's
Yeah.
a real way to find commonality in some of that that separateness again. So.
Hmm. Thank you. So I wanted to just share some words from some of the experts on cabaret. So I have this really great book called The Cabaret Artist's Handbook that's written by a cabaret critic in New York City, Bob Harrington, and with help from Sherry Eaker, who's another critic. And they help define what it is. So this is from their chapter, Qu'est-ce que c'est? Am I pronouncing that correctly, Andrea? Qu'est-ce
You
que
are.
c'est?
Qu'est-ce que
Okay.
c'est?
She's the French expert. Um, there was a lot of good cabaret in France, too, by the way.
Oh, yes. It all involves naked ladies, but it's great. Yeah.
And Jacques Brel, who I love.
Oh, yes. Jacques Brel, too. Very
Yeah.
ironic. Very ironic.
Qu'est-ce que c'est cabaret? In this chapter, they're trying to figure out how cabaret compares to other genres of the performing arts. And they say it's an awesomely all-encompassing genre, cabaret, welcoming with equally open arms singing styles from jazz to country western, magicians, comics, book shows, reviews, variety acts, and people who just stand there and tell stories. Many people think of cabaret as small-scale musical theater, and there are certainly gray areas where cabaret and theater begin to blur together. But essentially, theater and musical theater are voyeuristic pursuits. Success in cabaret is measured by how well you break down the invisible wall between yourself and your audience. If theater is voyeuristic, cabaret is participational. Audience energy affects cabaret far more than it does any other art form. So that's tricky for us doing this in a virtual world here, because you don't get immediate response from your audience. But I think it's really important as we are creating these cabaret stories this time around that you have an audience in mind already. You know, somebody you know, perhaps a family member, perhaps a neighbor or a friend, so that when you deliver this, you can kind of anticipate in a way what their responses might be and play off of that. It's kind of like talking to yourself and responding to yourself in a weird way. But I think if you ask a certain question to somebody and lay it out there, you kind of know where they might go with the answer if you've known them long enough, right? Any other thoughts on that, Andrea?
Yeah, I think that is really tricky, the participatory nature of audience and performer response. And we've definitely experienced that since quarantine in terms of doing video things and realizing, oh, it doesn't land the same way because there's nobody listening. And I think on some level as performers, we kind of always are performing with a specific audience in mind a little bit. So just it's good for us to really clarify that in this particular time and make that as specific as possible. That will really help you and give you a tool, not only in sensing what kind of response might be happening out there and virtual through the screen, but also in terms of crafting how you want to tell the story to begin with. So I don't think it's bad for us to have that idea right from the get-go. Who am I imagining is listening to this story on the other end, and how can I be effective at telling it?
Right. The next thing they say is all art involves the audience, just as Andrea just said, but cabaret acknowledges the audience. And I think that's it. And we acknowledge it quite directly in cabaret. We talk right to the audience. A good cabaret performer opens up, and by them opening up allows the audience to open up as well. So again, it's a kind of an intimate art form where we reveal some things that maybe other people don't know about us, right? Or even memories that we haven't shared in a long time. When it's over, you should feel that you know the performer as a person, not as a character, like in a play, but as a person, right? Cabaret holds out a challenge to the performer. Declare yourself and your talent in any way you like. Take chances. Be different. Experiment with form as well as content, which we are certainly doing now with this virtual class. Take it to the limit and find new limits beyond your initial vision. combine and recombine the components and invent something entirely new, which is super exciting for us to do. So if you're looking for creative expression, try experimenting with Cabaret. It's a unique performance style designed to engage the audience intimately in the performance itself, be it comedy, singing, or a combination of it all.
So we are going to show you a couple of examples here. And one of these is from a cabaret class that Joey and I taught in 2017. I think that's when it was, in the summer, at Episcopal Homes. And this is a woman named Mary Werner, who I worked with on this little set that she created. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about as we are helping you craft your stories is that there's no one path to getting to your cabaret set, to getting to your story. That's going to be generated, and it's going to evolve in ways that are unique to you and unique to that particular story. So when I was working with Mary, we were just talking about her childhood in a small town and some of the things that started to bubble up for her in terms of common threads, and she started to narrow her focus into one particular story about how she viewed romance as a young woman and how that changed over the course of her adolescence and college years.
I could cry salty tears. Where have I been all these years? Little wow, tell me now, how long has this been going on? I grew up in a tiny town in South Dakota. It was a typical tiny town with a wide front street with tall storefronts. And it was a county seat. So when you walked to the end of the block, which was Main Street, you turn right at the bakery, and there you see our courthouse, like a miniature federal building in some kind of sandstone. And it was on a plaza. And then when you walk past that building, toward the west, you turn to your left, and there's our church, St. Thomas. And then you look up to your right, and there, on top of what passes as a hill in South Dakota, is our school. It's a big school. It serves the whole county, all the surrounding farms. And we were a family of 4. My mom and 3 daughters. After my dad died in World War II, she had a rough time of it. I don't remember too much. I was only 4, but it was very hard for her. And she had wonderful friends. She always had a friend with her for quite a while there. And she became very strong. And she was a force to be reckoned with. By the time we started school, we had to have good grades, good behavior, and we had to always use good grammar. And without a male masculine presence in our home, we became a bit like a nunnery. We walked 4 blocks to Mass on Sunday through all kinds of weather, and grace before meals and bedtime prayers and the rosary. But then as we got a little bit older into grade school, we got too wrangly for her. She'd have to say to us, "Now stop your squabbling," which is what it sounded like, when kids are yelling back and forth. So she'd have us go 2 doors down to the movie theater. And we learned our life lessons, got our education from the movies. And we saw westerns, war stories, comedies, and those glorious musicals of the 50s. We would sing and dance all the way home and all around the house all week long. But it gave me a kind of a rosy view of the idea of romance. And I could imagine scenarios with Gregory Peck and Paul Newman and James Dean. was before. What a break, for heaven's sake. How long has this been going on?
You can see Andrea and I are laughing because the sound of the water gun or soda gun at the bar is bleeding through her video. And that is one thing that we don't need to worry about in doing these pre-recorded virtual cabarets. You won't have
Isn't that
dog
great?
sound.
Oh my gosh.
That's hysterical. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about with her set, and I'm sure you have stuff too, Andrea. The things that stood out to me were, first of all, she is so good at just like naturally telling a story. Now, I have to admit, part of the reason why I love doing cabarets with older adults is because most of you at this point are really good at telling stories. Like, that's what
And
life is all about.
you have the best stories because you've had the longest time to acquire them.
Exactly. Exactly. So she's so good. And even though that was scripted, a lot of that, like we had, Andrea had worked with her and had written down so much of that, it sounded like she was just talking off the cuff, right?
Right. It's so charming and engaging because she's just talking to us like we're all her best friends, even though she's never met half the room of those people. So it was just wonderful to hear how friendly and opening it is.
Yeah, especially considering she was the first performer in that set. She was very relaxed.
Yes.
Also, the structure of it, right? That there was some singing in the beginning, and then she talked, and then that song, Andrea, you kind of underscored her talking with some of the instrumental of that song, and then she finished the song at the end, which I think is such a beautiful bit of structure as well.
Yeah, it just it gives us the entire idea in a capsule. And we understand when it begins and we understand when it ends because the music frames it. And the music gives it the overall mood, which is rose-colored glasses and romance, right? That sets us up right from the beginning that we know that's what we're going to expect. And then she has this opportunity for humor in the middle when she's talking about her childhood and the specifics of that, which that comes out really beautifally.
Yeah, growing up in a nunnery with her sisters and her mom, basically. I love that. I love that. But then there's that. She's very open and honest. She lost her father. I mean, she's not hiding any details, right?
No, but there's no wallowing in self-pity over any of this.
Exactly.
It's just good humored and matter of fact.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And then also, I just wanted to say, like, that story she told it's not like the most extraordinary story you've ever heard, right? But it's something that like people relate to very easily, and it's lovely, and they're simple memories, but there's something so special about them, even though they're not extraordinary, right?
Yeah, so Joey and I taught this class recently this past fall in White Bear Lake, and we had a woman in that class who told a story about how she and her husband and kids went on a camping trip every year. I mean, that was the entirety of the story, and yet it had this tremendous meaning and emotional impact because of all of the details that she was able to tease out. And again, the story doesn't have to be larger than life to be as important as that.
Exactly. The next performer we're going to watch is also from that same group at Episcopal Homes. Her name is Carol McClellan. And when she first approached me, she wanted to do something to honor her love of country western music. So this is Carol singing a little for you.
Some of you young people may not realize that newspapers and radio were the only sources of news and entertainment on a daily basis back in the 1930s and the 1940s. Radio in those days was like television, only without the pictures. And I listened to Tina Autry on that radio show every Sunday afternoon for at least 2 years. and I learned to love all those old Western standards. Western music, cowboy music, if you will, is all about the wide open spaces of the Rocky Mountain states. Think of cowboys singing songs around a campfire, under dark skies at night just glittering with stars. Yeah, they're singing songs about the open trail over prairies and mountains and deserts. And it's a lonely life. And it's also somewhat hazardous life. Well, this is true. These cowboy hats here are not just part of the costume. They protect the cowboy from the glaring sun and from the nasty weather. And cowboy boots that most of the guys wore were protections against cactus and rattlesnakes and tumbleweeds. Hey fella, will you hold my hat for me? I'm tumbling down, pledging their love to the ground. Lonely but free I'll be found, drifting along to the tumbleweeds. I know one night is gone, that a new day is born at dawn. I'll keep rolling along. Deep in my heart is a song. Here on the range I belong, drifting along with the tumbleweeds.
So in the previous one that we showed, Mary Warner's set was kind of I believe she went on to talk about like lots of memories through many years, right? This set with Carol really focused on one trip that she took, one vacation that she took with her husband, who is the man she handed off her cowboy hat to in the beginning of that.
In a great example of acknowledging the audience very directly, right? Exactly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating how you can make a cabaret set about really absolutely anything, a single moment in your life or years and years and years of your life as well.
One of the things that Carol did so well in that set was that, the whole pace of it was set up by that bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, like that sort of set the tone of, sort of a very slow horse's gait, right, all the way through. But I felt like she put us in that place too with the speed of her narration. She didn't feel like it was rushed. There wasn't any anxiety to get to where she was going with it, but she just sort of put us in that place with her style of delivery. So that was a great artistic choice for helping us experience exactly what she wanted us to experience, which I thought was really cool. So
Yeah, and as we'll talk about in future videos, the power of choosing the right song, right? That accompaniment, that melody, right, really set the mood for the whole thing as well. Yeah.
right.
And I got to, as a piano player, I got to help her by kind of supporting her in her storytelling with what I was doing on the piano, which I'll be very curious to see how we do that virtually in creating these cabarets.
This is going to involve twice as much creativity as it usually does, but I feel confident that we are resourceful and imaginative enough to make that happen. So fear not.
Exactly.
Yes.
I also wanted to talk
Okay.
briefly about Carol, how she has a very low voice, and how what's so great about doing this is that we can make songs happen in any key, so it fits people's voices really well.
Right. The goal of this is not to turn you all into Olympic level singers. The goal is to use what abilities you have to their best storytelling capabilities. And we are happy to facilitate that. And we will always make you look good. Don't worry. So,
Let's do an example of a guy, shall we? So this is
Hello out there. Newsflash. I'm getting old. And I know there are people in the audience who will verify that. But you know, I don't mind getting older. I don't mind aging. I mean, considering the alternative. But what I do object to is some of the labels that are put on us as we age. Senior citizen. Where's my drool cup? There are others. There are others too. It's kind of insidious. Even at the Y, they have an exercise class called Silver Sneakers. It sounds like some kind of clandestine CIA organization. There have to be other names for it. You know, I know. How about golden geezers? With that, you know, it's all over the place. The American Automobile Association offers a class for older drivers. Guess what the name of it is? 55 Alive. Older? 55 is older? Oh my God, I'm 82 alive and I love it. I've had many wonderful things happen to me throughout my life. I enjoyed working with middle school kids, postgraduate ankle biters. Always, never predictable. Always, almost always fun. My children and my grandchildren have been a great joy to me. But my greatest joy was in knowing and loving my wife, Barbara. For her, it's very true. Our love is here to stay. Not for a year, but ever and a day. And the telephone and the movies that we know may just be passing fancies, and in time they go. But oh my dear, our love is here to stay. Together we're going a long, long way. Gibraltar may tumble, they're only made of clay, but our love is here to stay.
Well, gee.
That's so charming.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about Jerry as a person, but also he really showed himself in that cabaret set that he has a very open heart, and he did not spare us. You can see he's funny, but also he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he was able to do that in performance. So that was really lovely to witness and be a part of.
Yeah, and one of the things that really I caught in that particular recording is that when he starts singing that song, you can hear people in the audience kind of humming along with a little bit,
Mhm.
because of course it's a beloved song, and I feel like that's the greatest possible compliment, that we're all so with you emotionally that we're just doing it with you. We can't even help ourselves, and it's just a wonderful moment where people just kind of go along for the ride with him. And he really knows his audience. He knows that this room is full of people like himself who are active and capable older adults, and who are fatigued with being thought of as somehow less than, right? And so he's really playing to them, with this humor that he's bringing to it, which again points to that idea of having a specific audience that you're really aiming to reach with your story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I would love it if we would show one person who has been doing this their whole life, actually, because these other three people, believe it or not, that was the first time any of them had ever done anything like this, just like you will be. But it would be good to learn a little bit from the pros as well. So we're going to show you a little bit of Marilyn May performing. Marilyn May is a cabaret performer who was actually made famous because she performed on the Johnny Carson show more than any other performer during that time. She was his go-to person. Whenever anyone canceled on the Carson show, he would call her up and she would book it out there to the theater, and she would be on that night. I think she performed over 40 times on the Johnny
Oh
Carson
my.
show. Anyway, Marilyn May just turned 91, and she's still performing. She was in the Twin Cities actually recently, performing at Crooners just a couple months ago. And when she turned 90, her cabaret was called 90 at Last, I think. And then when she turned 91, she said her cabaret was called Oh, to be 90 Again.
Just fantastic. Here's Marilyn May, and I think we'll actually see this whole thing. Is that correct,
I
Joey?
think so, yeah. It's worth
Yeah,
seeing.
because it's worth seeing. So
Yeah.
The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. That's what you're doing. The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. I know. Well, everyone can do it here. I know it's anyone can do it, but I want to change it, because here everyone's enjoying it. Everyone can do it. There is nothing to it. Everyone knows that we're almost on top of the hill. And since we're on our way up further up, we might as well enjoy the ride. The secret of love is in opening up your heart. It's okay to feel afraid, but don't let that stand in your way. Everyone knows that love is the only road. And since we're only here for a while, might as well show some style. Give me a smile. Isn't it a lovely ride? We go sliding down, gliding down. Don't try too hard, 'cause it's a lovely ride. Life is a lovely ride. It's a wonderful ride. The thing about time is that time isn't really real. No, you see, it's just your point of view. How does it feel for you? You know, Einstein said he could never understand it all. and no regrets. I still believe in chasing dreams and placing bets. And I have learned for all you give, it's all you get. So you give it all you've got. I've had my share, I drank my fill, and even though I'm satisfied, I'm hungry still to see what's down the other side, beyond the hill, and do it all again. So here's to life and every joy it brings. Yes, here's to life, to dreamers and their dreams. When you're young, the notes are never wrong, and soon you learn that near the music you belong. Wish we could turn the years into a longer song. Oh, I'd sing it all again. So here's to life and every melody. Yes, here's to life and all our memories. It's funny how the time just flies, how love can go from warm hellos to sad goodbyes, and leave you with your memories you've memorized to keep your winters warm. Well, there's no yes in yesterday, and who knows what tomorrow brings or takes away. As long as I'm still in this game, I wanna play for laughs, for life, for love. So here's to life and every joy that it brings. Here's to life, to dreamers and their dreams. May all your storms be weathered and all that's good get better. Here's to life, here's to love, here's to dreams come true. May all your storms be weathered and all that's good get better. Here's to life, here's to love, and here's to you. Here's to you. Cheers.
Such a
Yikes.
powerhouse. I mean, I think she was in her mid-80s when she did that. I mean, what a powerhouse, right?
Yeah, such a powerful personality that she just lets us see all of it, which is wonderful. It's just
Yeah.
wonderful to
And
be
she-
invited in.
She like gives it away, right? You know, when I met her, Andrea, at Crooners, I've met her twice now, and that second time I met her here, she waited in the middle of the room at a table with her friends until all the audience left, and she entertained us at her table. As people left, they went and talked to her, and she would sit us down and talk to us. I mean, it was like she was everybody's friend, and there must have been over 100 people in that room, and she talked to everybody.
Well, it is sort of like being the host of a fabulous party. to
It
use
is.
as a cabaret story, right?
That's a great
You're
comparison.
taking care of everyone with this wonderful entertainment and just checking in with them as you are engaging them with your story. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that that's sort of part of who she is, because she's so good at that aspect, when she's on stage.
That's a great comparison. You are the host of a fabulous party. and and for, many people, as we get older, we've hosted more and more parties. So people have experience in that already.
You know how to do this already. Exactly.
Yeah,
So
that's great. I wanted to say just a couple little things. She's a musician first. She's a classically trained singer, and so you can tell that. Like, she's very comfortable singing, and she uses singing to express herself, and that's not to intimidate those of us who haven't had singing our whole lives, right? Like, maybe we can tell our stories more spoken. It does not need to be completely sung like what she just demonstrated so eloquently. And the fact that there were 2 songs there, actually, that she made a medley of 2 different songs. And that craftsmanship is something that Andrea and I can help with.
right, and that's I think a pretty standard thing that you'll find when you're choosing or starting to look at music that you might incorporate. You might find a couple of different pieces that each speak to a different element that you want to include in your story, and there's nothing to say that we can't mash that up in some creative way. And musically, Joey and I can take care of all of that, but if we can talk that through, and there are ways that we can manage that for you. It's a great tool for storytelling purposes.
Right. So I believe that is it for today's lesson.
Yes. So I'll give you a little bit of a preview for next time. So next time we're going to talk about how we would start to create the storyline that you would want to present, and how you start to write patter. Patter is the spoken part of cabaret that we're talking about. How you write that and craft that in a way that's engaging and effective, and some exercises that we can do in order to start to generate some material that you can then work from. So that's what we'll be spending our time with next week.
And of course, these videos, I believe, are being broadcast to everyone at Ling Bloomston who can see them. But if you want to continue when these 3 videos are over and work on your own set with me and Andrea, privately, one-on-one, then please sign up with Andrea Lewandowski or Deb Hanisch or anyone from the activities staffs at your buildings.
Great. And we look forward to getting to engage in some stories with you guys. So stick with it and start thinking about what kind of stories you might want to tell.
We are going to leave you today with an interview between Marilyn May and a talk show host. And so you can learn a little bit about her and the art of cabaret and how it has changed her life.
So that'll be following this video in the playlist. And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
So take care.
When the red, red robin come bop, bop, bobbin', the red, red robin come bop, bop, bobbin', bobbin', the red, red robin come